I'm Rachel Madel from Talking with Tech.
And I'm Chris Bouguet from Talking with Tech.
We have a podcast dedicated to augmentative and alternative communication, all things related to helping kids with complex communication needs.
If you have a passion for helping people with language disabilities, this is the show for you. Each episode features an interview or a roundtable discussion on a topic related to augmentative communication and helping people with language disabilities.
And we're really passionate about giving practical strategies to clinicians working in the field who are working with children or adults, anything related to AAC.
So you can look us up on iTunes, or you can find us on Facebook. We got a group over there, or check out our website at bit.ly/TWT podcast.
Please join our community of professionals that are working to ensure that everyone can say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it.
Please listen carefully.
What is communication?
An essential behavior of life. We have the both blessing and responsibility of trying to foster another.
It's the strongest way for two people to convey information to each other.
Communication is a lifeline.
It's just connection with other people.
Connecting people in terms of ideas, thoughts, or needs.
Draws us out of ourselves, draws us into that relationship, builds up our families. Without it, we'd be lost.
Whatever it is that we do to express intent and achieve an impact.
Communication is the ability to express your needs, wants, frustrations, and desires to anyone that you feel needs to have that information.
Welcome to Speech Science, episode 93, proud members of the Exceptional Podcast Network. I'm Matt Hott, and I'm excited because a long-lost member of the show has returned. It's Michael McLeod.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, man. I'm good. How was your Facebook Live and traveling across the country?
It was good. It was a good time. I was able to meet up with the Focus Foundation, which is a great group that I do a lot of work with. It was nice. It was a really good trip. Able to see some people that I haven't seen in a while and reconnect with a couple of groups and some families. So it's always nice to kind of get out of Philly for a while.
There you go.
Yep.
And then the true heavy lifter of the show, Michelle Wintering.
Nah, I think that's probably more Matt Hott, but thank you.
Hey man, you've got to raise a newborn, live near a military base, do interviews. You're the heavy lifter of the show.
I will give it a shot. I like the credit sometimes, but no, no, I'm doing well. I just have a no longer newborn that is thankfully sleeping. I almost got on here a little late with you guys, and if I disappear, he might come back sitting on my lap for the recording, but that's okay.
I understand. When this show airs, my 2.5-year-old will now be 3. But before all that, we get into anything fun, we want to talk to you at home. Make sure you head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com. That'll take you to all of our back shows. And from there, you can also find our patreon.com/speechsciencepodcasts, or give us a text or a phone call, 614-681-1798. Email, of course, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. Guys, another episode is dropped in our laps. I'm excited for this one, but before we get into anything, let's recount our weeks. I'll start because today I got 6.5 hours of no kids to just do progress reports. I started at 7:45. I ended at 3:05, and my day ended at 3:15. I think I finally officially used my time correctly.
Hey, nice. So was it a work day for you all?
It was. When we're recording this, it is either Columbus Day or Indigenous People Day, depending on what your city, state, or affiliation uses. So we worked, and our kids got to enjoy a 3-day weekend. My wife took my son to the Lego store in Columbus, while I slaved over a hot computer drinking Arnold Palmer's and Coca-Colas while typing out progress reports.
Isn't it amazing how much you can get done when no one is bothering you, or you don't have other patients to see to break it up?
I loved it. Other than that, I've had a pretty easy weekend. Let's start with the man who's been a man of mystery, Michael McLeod. Fill us in briefly. What's been going on? So you met with a couple of your groups and you just kind of traveled everywhere?
Yeah, I work with I guess it's called a nonprofit. I would suppose, I'm not sure, it's definitely a nonprofit, but it's a group down in Annapolis, Maryland called the Focus Foundation. that works with boys and girls with various chromosomal disorders. And many of them appear with very similar symptoms, such as apraxia of speech, as well as executive dysfunction. So I work on both the speech side with the apraxia. A lot of them require AAC devices as well, and as well as the executive dysfunction side of things. So a lot of work directly with the families, really answering questions and things like that. So it's really one of those very rare diagnoses that parents receive. So they really want to speak to specialists that really understand really the profile of the student and really the best way to go, because there's some really great new techniques in terms of treating the young boys with testosterone treatments and things like that, and it's shown to be incredibly beneficial. But it's one of those things that parents hear immediately and think, oh, we need more information on this. What are the possible side effects? These sorts of things. So having one group of specialists is very, very valuable to these families, and to be a part of it is amazing. And all the fellow doctors and OTs and PTs there, it's just an incredible.
So how'd you get hooked up with that?
They do a lot of work in Philadelphia as well. So we've met each other through IEP meetings and various other groups. So we pretty much connected here in Philly.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, that is a pretty cool, Mike. You are doing noble work, and I salute you, sir. That is pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.
Michelle, you have to follow that. What have you been up to?
Last week I had to follow you, Matt, and your awesome stories. Nothing too crazy here. Speech therapy and evaluations at the outpatient clinic I'm at, and fall break in a lot of the districts around here is a week or even 2 weeks, which is a unique schedule that I'm not used to, but I was able to get in some extra sessions with a few of my kids who weren't traveling or gone for their breaks, and hanging out with baby speech science and enjoying it, actually feeling like fall this week in the Midwest northern part of the South, I guess, where I live. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know what's been going on out in Philly, Mike, but here in Cincinnati, and I'm assuming it's been down the same thing down in your way, Michelle, we had temperatures that were finally in the 50s and 60s as highs, and it was wonderful.
It was fantastic. I just want to wear my boots and scarves and sweaters.
Ugh.
No.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, no. I don't think so.
I like the cold weather. Bring me the cold weather.
I'm not a fan.
I will sleep with the windows open in snow. Hey guys, October is AAC Awareness Month, and the interview for today, I got to talk to the developers of the Lyra app. It is an AAC app that they developed for their child, and are hoping that it helps other students. So in part of AAC Awareness Month, we're going to run with that. Also, who's heard of using oral motor exercises and no research? We're going to talk about tongue strength in children with and without speech sound disorders. Hey, Michelle, don't give me that look. It is in the American Journal of Speech Language Pathology. It's real research. We're also going to talk about why Mike's...
I didn't say it wasn't real research.
I know. We're going to talk about why Mike's state of Pennsylvania has to rethink their funding formula. And Hugh Grant says the movie theaters are way too loud. But first, I love when articles just drop themselves in our laps. A week and a half ago, it was PDPM, and that dropped into our lap for 2 episodes. This week, it's ABA and the Arizona Speech and Language Pathology group. Have you guys been following this at all?
I just saw this yesterday for the first time.
So did I. Same thing. Yep.
So I reached out to a couple of my contacts in Arizona, and basically this all started on the back burner. It's been burning for a while, that ABA therapists are billing and trying to bill and trying to evaluate and treat for communication disorders and such. And I guess there is a proposal that says ABA services are medically necessary when there are specific and objectively defined target behaviors impacting the member's development, communication, or ability to access or participate in their environment or community. The SLP community got up into a big uproar because of that little word communication, because guess what, guys? Communication is the scope of the SLPs, right?
It certainly is. There's no doubt about it.
It's a big meaning in a little word.
And if you talk to an ABA, they say all behavior is communication, and that is why they are allowed to evaluate. That's what they will say. But ASHA dropped the hammer on September 19th. This is when this letter hit, but it kind of hit Facebook yesterday, which would be October 13th or October 12th, where they're saying remove the word communication from that and we don't have a problem. Keep the word communication in, and now you've got an encroachment on our scope of practice. I love this.
Why do you love it?
Because the ASHA president, Dr. Sherry Robertson, we've had her on the show before. My biggest thing is that no one cares about our scope of practice. OTs don't care about our scope of practice. PTs don't care about our scope of practice. ABA don't care about our scope of practice. The only people that should and do care about our scope of practice are SLPs. And if we don't set perimeters to define our role in both the medical and the school field, we won't have jobs in 15 years. And I don't think I'm trying to be too over dramatic, but when ABA says they can look at communication, when occupational therapy says that they can handle dysphagia and swallowing,
yep,
we're running out of areas that we are experts in, and you're going to see our field shrink back into articulation experts. OT looks at executive functioning now, and that's not to say that there's not a part that is occupational therapy, and that is not to say that behavior should not be looked at ABA, but we need to define our scope of practice. And it's refreshing to see our national organization not just send out a letter saying, hey guys, step backwards. It literally says, drop the word communication.
And you're going to share this letter, right?
Yes, I'll have a link up to it, and I think it's blowing up on a lot of the different SLP Facebook groups as well.
So if you don't mind, I'll read the sentence they're talking about in the proposed Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System Medical Policy Manual section, blah, blah, blah. So it says ABA services are medically necessary when there are specific and objectively defined target behaviors impacting the member's development, communication, or ability to access or participate in their environment or community. And so obviously the word we're talking about that ASHA has stated now in Arizona, they would like removed from that statement is the word communication, so that it would just say impacting a member's development or ability to access or participate in their environment or community.
I'm shaking my head. You can't hear that rattle on the airways. I apologize. But
I think it makes sense because that is more specific. If you throw in communication, I realize that communication is part of behavior. I've said that in IEP meetings. They're communicating through their behavior. I've used that phrase, but we have to advocate for ourselves like we advocate for our students and our patients and our clients and whatever you want to call them and whichever setting you're in. We have to advocate for our profession and say, this is our area of expertise. And that word is very important.
The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has indicated that treatment for speech, hearing, and language disorders for individuals with ASD are to be provided under the direction of an SLP or an audiologist. CMS also states that ABA is only one treatment modality for ASD, and they do not endorse or require any single treatment modality for ASD. Again, though, this all comes down to funding dollars, and when your pie is getting cut up exponentially, every organization is going to fight for their dollars. And I love that ASHA has stepped in to help the SLPs over in Arizona.
Yep. And I think that is where, we said this in the last podcast, we have to advocate in our individual states. And it seems like someone connected in Arizona policy, right? Brought this to the attention of ASHA.
And that's a good time also to plug for episode 100 in 7 weeks will be the Arizona State Superintendent, who is also an SLP, and she'll be interviewed on the show. Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I have definitely mentioned a few times, definitely that we see oftentimes on Facebook, people complaining about ASHA, really saying, what did they do? What are the positive benefits of ASHA? Well, here we go. This is a time where ASHA can really advocate for us. And that letter about ABA has been spread all over Facebook. And I think this is a good example of some of the positive work they can do to really advocate for us.
It is blown up. That is for sure. We want to hear from you, though. Are you advocating in your state? What is your thought on this? What is your thought on the impact of ABA? We threw it up on our on our Facebook group, facebook.com/Speech Science Podcast, and got a couple of likes and shares. So I assume they like our message as well as ASHA's message. But we want to hear from you. Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com. Email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com, or give us a phone call, 614-681-1798, or hashtag it SSPod. Mike and Michelle, when's the last time you've been to the movies?
This past weekend.
What'd you see?
Joker.
Michelle?
The last movie I went to was the new Incredibles when I was still pregnant.
Aww,
so
it's been a while.
Nice.
Yep.
I have a movie subscription, and it is to one of the national ones, and they don't sponsor us, so I'm not going to mention it right now. And so I go to the movies probably once or twice a month, and I might be getting older, but there are times when I go to the movies and I feel that it's a little too loud. What do you guys think?
I agree. I definitely agree, especially during some movies, like war movies. It definitely gets way too loud. Like I remember that movie Dunkirk. That movie was crazy loud.
Yeah, and
Michelle?
I've specifically selected seats away from where I know that they're the farthest I can get because it is overwhelming sometimes.
My theater down here has seats. I'm sorry, the movie theater has over 100 speakers is how they talk about it. And some of them are under your seats. And for big explosions, it is deafening. There's an article coming out of The Guardian. Do you guys know who Hugh Grant is? Am I too old to know who Hugh Grant is?
Does he have a British accent?
He does. I
think I know who that is.
He was like the guy for the longest time.
Yes, I know who he is. He was the president in Love, actually.
Yes, thank you. That's what it was. Well, he is saying that movies...
Prime Minister, sorry.
I'm sorry, Prime Minister, yeah. But he is saying
Wrong country.
that movies are just too loud. He says that when he went to go see Joker, it was, quote, pointless. The joke was on us. And then he says, am I old or is the cinema much too loud in his Twitter account? And he brings up a good point. Movie theaters have been pushing the envelope on how much sound they can put into us and how much they can make it a surround sound experience. Movie theaters say they try to keep it below 85 decibels, but at times, if it goes out of compliance, it is over 85 decibels in strength.
Wow. I did not know that.
I feel like I should bring my earplugs now to tone it down in the movie theaters.
According to dangerousdecibels.com, a bulldozer that is idling is loud enough at 85 decibels that it can cause permanent damage after only 8 hours standing next to it. So not permanent damage for a 2.5 hour long movie at 85 decibels, but when's the last time you thought about standing next to a bulldozer in your movie theater?
Did you say dangerousdecibels.com?
Dangerousdecibels.com. They say typical conversations are about 60 to 65 decibels. Music can range out of 100 decibels, and a clap of thunder from a nearby storm is 120, and a gunshot is 140 to 190 decibels. I reached out to a doctor of audiology who has a background in film. He would like to remain anonymous at this point, but he says they definitely should, they being movie theaters, should stay below 80 decibels. I think it sounds bad too because when it's turned up so loud, it's pushing the limits of the speakers. And at that point, all you're doing is going for effect versus improvement of the film.
He makes a good point.
But you know what, guys? I've never thought about it, but yeah, I've thought about, Michelle, that I wanted to bring my HD earplugs into the movie theaters before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even kidding. I've thought about wearing my earplugs to a Zumba class I've been to because the music was so loud before.
Oh, that means you are getting loud, Michelle.
I'm getting old.
Getting old and loud.
Old and loud. I have to talk louder.
Old yeller.
I can't hear myself.
But I want you guys to think about that. That was a nice little palate cleanser for the ASHA. Coming up after the break, I talked to the developers of the Lyra app, and we want to hear from you. Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com. Email speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. We'll be right back. You're listening to Speech Science.
Do you have an idea for a product or book? Or are you ready to go beyond in-service presentations? Well, how do you get started? And what if you don't have any business experience at all? Well, I have some great news for you. I'm Mei-Ling Chan, and I'm getting the nitty-gritty stories from parents, teachers, therapist advocates, and people with disabilities who have created successful businesses, and they're sharing their intimate stories with you. Listen to us on the Exceptional Leaders Podcast and fast-track creating and building and sharing your idea with the world so that you can help more people.
Welcome back to Speech Science. I'm Matt Hott, joined today all the way from across the pond, March Rogers.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
And out in New Jersey, Cat Noone.
Hey, thanks for having us.
And the reason you're on is because you guys have created a AAC app called Lyra. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's a symbol-to-speech app designed specifically for children with autism.
So before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, let's just do a quick, who are you? And then why did you come around to do this? And I guess, March, we'll start with you because you emailed me first.
Sure. So I'm a dad. I have two kids, and my 10-year-old daughter was diagnosed with autism when she was 2, and she's pretty nonverbal. She has a lot of challenges with verbal communication, and so really since the beginning of when we started speech therapy with her, we have been really focused on her communication skills. And so through that process, we've used kind of almost every sort of AAC and specifically symbol-to-speech tool that you can find. And it was always really hard for us to find a match for her. We definitely have, and she has come leaps and bounds from where she was. And a lot of that is to do with really great sort of speech therapists sort of building plans for us around that. But we always felt like there was something that could be more well suited for her and for kids like her. So yeah, that's where we came from. And the name of the app, Lyra, is named after our daughter, whose name is also Lyra.
And then, Kat, how did you get involved with this?
It's a wild ride from start to finish. So I actually started after college. I worked in special ed for quite some time in New York City for the Department of Ed and private sector, and worked predominantly with children with autism and in ABA rooms and bouncing to and from, but specifically focused on early intervention. And even then, we saw how, and this feels like eons ago now, we saw how archaic this method was, and it felt like, given the direction that technology was going, that this could be far more advanced, and there was nothing really out there. And fast forward a few years, I ended up in the world of design, and then fast forward a few more years, met March through the internet somehow. I think it was Twitter somehow.
Yeah.
And worlds collide forward. He's working with my husband at Microsoft. And, at one point we were all in the same city and we got to talking about it, both of our worlds and experience and how there could be more. And we said, let's do it. Let's actually be the ones to do it. If nobody else is going to, let's do it.
Yeah. So this has been a passion project for us because we all sort of have, day jobs to keep the lights on. And so we have a small team of 5 people who've been working on this and just sort of gradually building it up over the last couple of years, doing the research, exploring different designs and actually building out the app. And we just launched it last month.
There was a study that I read a couple weeks ago, maybe about 2 months now, and it said that 3% of all eligible AAC or speech generating device users have access to a device, which means that 97% of people who would benefit from it don't have one for either personal reasons or can't afford one or et cetera.
Right.
And I find it interesting that we live in such a really cool time where the technology is finally catching up to the needs of our populations, our students, our children, our parents. What made you guys decide on the flow of the app? It looks like and I'll have a link, it's getlyra.com, but it looks very similar to what we in speech therapy would look at, maybe like a PECS board, where you've got categories and the different pictures. What made you guys decide that route versus more categories, kind of like a touch chat or something similar to like a lamp?
So I'll say that and this is sort of our whole philosophy about this app, is that, you know, we all come from the world of software, and the idea there is that you are very agile and are driven more by your curiosity than your confidence. And so all the answers that we'll give, we have opinions and philosophy about it, but the goal is to relate to the community of users and be able to really rapidly evolve the application to be what people need. So that's my first answer, which is to say we're very open to being informed and educated by the community about what we need to do differently or in addition. So that being said, we did have an opinion when we started the app, which was to try and optimize for requesting. So, you know, in sort of the PECS phases, one of the things you want to do is make sure that there is a really natural incentive for the communicator. In our case, because we're focused on children with autism, I'll say child or student, to want to use the tool and to learn how to use it. And so requesting and for desired objects and desired foods and things like that, and places and people, seemed like a good place to start. And so to do that, we wanted to have front and center on our homepage what those objects would be. And that's why we optimized for this sort of transparency into the categories. The categories exist, they are actually in the app, but the homepage is sort of like a summary of each of the categories, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Can I talk to your point about the 97% of people who could benefit from this? We're pretty aware of that, and I will say we've started on the iPad, which is the most used AAC technological device. So it's a natural place to start, and it's the one with the most sort of infrastructure around delivering the app. But it's always been our goal to try and get it to as many people as possible. And that one, we've built it so that it should be fairly straightforward for us as we get going to be able to transport it over to Android, where the devices are just a lot cheaper and more available. And the other one is we have a commitment that for every 10 licenses that we sell, we're going to donate one for free.
That's awesome. I was about to ask, like, how do you, like, the pricing structure, I was looking at it, and it is $79 for the year, or $8 a month. And I was going to ask you, how do you handle, like, people that want to try it but don't have the funds to do that? So I like that donation idea. I do like that.
Yeah, and we have a 30-day free trial, so everybody can try it out at first. And we're actually in the process of just, literally we launched last month, so we're still sort of learning what is it that would be obstacles for people to try it, and we want to remove every obstacle that exists. So if it turns out that the 30-day free trial with the subscription model is an obstacle for people, we're definitely open to exploring other models. And of course, we do know that like school districts and SLP clinics and things can't necessarily sort of buy subscription software per device. And so we're looking at all of those ways. Essentially, our goal is to anyone who wants to use Lyra should be able to use Lyra.
Right.
I know some like companies will offer like a free download or whatever to the therapist so they can try it and then say, oh, this is something that you'd suggest to the parent. What I like about Lyra is kind of looking around with it and such, was that a lot of times as SLPs, we get locked into, oh, this is the only device that my student can use, and it's the only one, and this is the one that they will use from birth until death. And the idea behind AAC is that, you know what, if I just need quick access to words, there's an app. If I need a full, robust set of vocabulary to discuss quantum physics, there's a set for that. Why did you guys design it the way you did? So like the white background, and it just, was there anything like, did Lyra enjoy that, or how did you guys come up with that design? He's pointing at Cat. It's an interview.
So I think there are a few things that collided in terms of, you know, the decisions that we came to with the design. A lot of it had to do with the conversations we were having with people, and we've talked to everyone with from speech language pathologists to teachers to adults with autism, and so for us we said, okay, the common theme here is that people in general, no matter who you're talking to and whatever product you're building, people want something that feels familiar. For us, though, we said, you know, familiar is a bit dated. So how do we take this product that is so heavily dependent on and create something that is very clear and straightforward and beautiful to use? And for us, having that white background, for instance, means that the cards that sit on top of it are emphasized. They're very clear to see. They're easy to see. For me, immediately when I think textbook, I think red binder with cards on it, and you know, then the sentence strip. And I just remember it always being this very jarring experience from visuals to like cumbersome, like going through these million pages. So for us, clarity across the board was key.
And one other thing I'll add is that we made a choice early on to have most of our symbol cards use photographs. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that there's a fair amount of research that would imply that, particularly for younger kids, that it's just easier for them to grasp and to be able to make the connection and extend the label from a symbol to the actual object if the symbol sort of resembles the object very highly. And literally a photograph is as close as you can get. Now, that doesn't mean that you could do that for everything. And we will have illustrations. We do have illustrations for certain words. And as we add more and more core vocabulary and more abstract terms like descriptors and pronouns and things like that, you obviously will be using illustrations for some of those things. But there is, I mean, we kind of went back into the literature, and, you know, back in 1989, there was a study by Miranda and Locke that showed that comparing symbol transparency is how they defined it, that with the goal of matching a task to an object, they found the easiest task was to match the object to the object, then followed by color photography, then followed by black and white photography, then miniature versions of the object, and then finally symbols. Actually, sorry, the hardest one was written words, but illustrative symbols, especially for younger kids in the preschool era, is really a hard thing to translate into the real world. So I know that some kids prefer symbols and are like illustrations and cartoons and stuff, and that's fine. But that was why we started with this very photographic approach.
I use LAMP with some of my students, and you know, it's funny, like kids, their brains will adapt, and then they will be like, oh, we can do this. And I always laugh because some of the symbols with LAMP, and I love the PRC app, and some of the parents will be like, what is that symbol for? And then we replace it with a real world picture. Sometimes we replace it with an image that they're familiar with. Now, I saw that you can add your own pictures, and was that using Google search for the Lyra app, or how does that look? Because I saw in the video where you typed in red car and a bunch of different red cars showed up.
Right.
Is that using Google Image, or are those preloaded onto there, or
yeah,
something else?
That's right. It's actually using Bing image search, which is, you know, it's a search engine.
Microsoft.
But it's exactly, yeah, but it's filtered by my day job is I'm a designer at Microsoft, so I had a slight bias. But essentially, it's all kind of like royalty-free and copyright-free images filtered, so you can get these very sort of iconic pictures. And it's, I don't know, for me, I remember this with my own daughter, when the default sort of cartoon of a car didn't look anything like our car.
Right.
And literally, like we would call the car either, you know, you're getting in the red car, you're getting in the white car, whatever it is, you know, as part of like trying to give her a visual schedule of the day. And so, so being able to actually just show me a picture of a red car can be really helpful. Now, of course, you can just go take a photo with your iPad and just have your own custom photo in there. But the nice thing about the image search that we liked is, you know, the way a lot of these apps, you kind of have to like program them in advance. We wanted to be able to, like, we're in the shopping mall and we want to have a little social story about going to the grocery store. I wanted to be able to make that social story from new words that weren't in the app, like on the spot. And so that's why we have the Google image search, or sorry, the Bing image search in there. So you can just be like, boom, 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 we're going to get apples, we're going to get washing powder, we're going to go to the checkout, we're going to talk to the cashier, and make those 4 words in real time.
That was part of the app that I love actually when looking at it, was because of what you just said. There's so many times I'll be working in therapy and I'll be like, and the mom will send me an email or a text and it's like, oh, we, forgot to tell you before session started, he's really like, or she's really liking whatever.
Right. Like, what is the flavor of the day?
And you go,
boys.
Okay, well, let me quickly Google search or Bing search on my phone, and then let me take a screen picture with the device.
Right.
As soon as you were like, or in the video, it types in red car, and the website again is getlyra.com. But, I saw him just type in red car, and all the images showed up, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Just use Wi-Fi to grab that in there.
Yeah.
How did, and I guess this is going to go towards Cat first, how did your background as ABA, and I have to reference first that there is some not happy thoughts between SLPs and ABAs. I work with a wonderful behavioral person who, and this is my theory on behavior, just so you know where I'm coming from.
Sure. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we all want the same thing. You look at it from behavior. I look at it from communication. It's awesome. We could be working together.
Right.
So what's your thought?
Now we've landed here at Lyra, and it's this happy world of, I feel like for someone, the two have to collide somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no, it's funny because I just had a conversation with someone yesterday where we were talking about ABA therapy, and I said, I have this love-hate relationship with it. I feel like to a certain degree, it's very mechanical. I feel like it's a little bit cold. It doesn't feel warm. At the same time, that's like asking, what's the difference between verbal and nonverbal? Like, I feel like even that in itself is a spectrum. So for me, I think my background from school and then working in special ed, it just gave me insight into the entire process. And I think even deep down then, it was just a matter of, I loved solving problems. And I loved getting to this common goal of like helping people succeed and, whatever success looks like for that particular individual. And so for me, working on Lyra, it brought me back and I focused heavily and tried to channel in on, what each student was feeling, and what success looked like for each of them and what those individual needs were and where the failures were happening. And so I think just overall, bringing in a lot of what I loved about ABA and what I loved seeing the SLPs work on, and what I didn't like about the two, and kind of make sure that we delivered an overall like really great experience for whoever was using the product, because I think that's also like in this like forgotten community is a group of people. It's like a triangle. There's the parents, there's the educators, and there's the child/student. So it's just like, how do we take this daunting experience? And I immediately think of weekends. Like anytime I think of daunting experience, I think weekends. Because for us, it was like, these students don't have their PEX binder with them. They have a different one with them. Did they bring these cards? Oh my goodness, what if they go somewhere? They don't have this. And then we know that it's going to be overwhelming for the parents. And it's just, next week when they come back, what does that experience look like? And so for us, it was like, how do we change that? How do we give them something that scales, that mom or dad or whatever guardian can use, and then they can come back to school and the SLP can continue with that same experience, familiarity, comfortability, a positive challenge, were all things that we said, and that I personally said, how do we bake that into the product?
And we record this and this is April, so it is Autism Awareness. This will be running probably during May, which is Better Speech and Hearing Month here in the States. And I'm reading on the blog, and it says that this was a 2 years of research, but how much more time was actually when did you come up with the idea? And maybe this is more for March again, but when did you come up with the idea? Because this podcast was a year research, but it was something in the back of my brain since grad school 8 years ago. When did you come up with the idea that like, hey, what's working for our daughter's not working? I need to do something better.
I mean, I will say it was a very gradual accretion, right? Like I am first and foremost a parent of a child with autism. So when she was first diagnosed 8 years ago, I was at the bottom of a very tall mountain where I was extremely ignorant about the condition and on the challenges and the therapies and the interventions. And I was sort of a slow climb up that mountain. So it was really several years before I felt experienced enough to even start to critique the existing systems and how they were working for Lyra. My wife, Kristen, who's another one of our founders, was actually further ahead than me on that, and was starting to ask questions about, really, is this the right approach, right? Rather than doing what the experts told us, we were starting to say, well, what is right for Lyra based on what we know? But I do think it was in my head of like a dissatisfaction, not necessarily the goal to make something better, but a dissatisfaction with the tools that were available. And some of them were just because, I mean, we live in this modern software world where your app automatically gets updated. And if you have like Spotify on your phone, you can just have Spotify, and then you go home and you can continue playing the same song on your PC, right? And it's seamless. Right. Why doesn't that exist for these AAC tools? So that was like starting to annoy me. And then also the fact that a lot of the tools we were using were overly complicated because they were trying to solve too many problems at once. Right. They were trying to provide a communication solution for everybody, from like somebody with a traumatic brain injury and therefore they have aphasia, to some sort of dystonia, to varieties of different mental disabilities and challenges. And when you try to solve that many problems in an app or a program, it has to be very complicated, and therefore it's not really easy to use for anybody for any one of those scenarios. So those two things of like, why isn't this modern and why is it trying to solve so many problems, really triggered me about 3 or 4 years ago. But honestly, it was a conversation, as Kat mentioned, with Kat and one of our other founders, her husband Ben, who just have more experience with starting these sort of startups and companies and apps than I do, where I basically complained to them, and they were like, dude, let's just do something about this. And that was when it turned into a real thing. And that was about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that moment too. We were sitting in our house in Berlin, and when we said to March, let's just do it, let's build it, he kind of looked at us like, you're nuts. You're just you're losing it. We've lost a cat. And we had just had our daughter Emma, so he probably really thought I was losing it with hormones. But we continued that conversation, and the more we discussed it, the more it became this reality, and the more we realized it was a big problem. And like March said, there's so many great apps out there that just bend the advancements of technology. And so we said, how do we provide this automation and intelligence and ease of use and simplicity to a very complex, often difficult, scenario.
One of our co-founders, Lucas Stuber, he would be all over this right now and have so many technical questions, because on his free time, he builds AAC devices out of like the cheapest tablet and cheapest eye gaze, just to show that you can do this. And those are available if you look on YouTube under Speech Science. But I think it's such a cool thing that you guys are able as a team, there were 5 of you, to look at a problem and say, hey, what's working for, in your case, March, for our daughter isn't working. One of the best apps I've ever used was designed by a parent who saw the SLP having a hard time taking data and just was like, well, I'm going to create a better data collection app. And it's a great app. But I apologize. My 2-year-old just walked in on me.
Don't apologize for that.
That has never happened to me. Or rather, I should say that always happens to me.
But my question to you guys is that it's just launched last month. What is it like now that you finally, I don't want to say rest because it's launched, but what's the next steps with Lyra? How does it feel to actually get it out there? What's your thoughts?
So I think for us, getting it out there was just so liberating. It felt so good knowing it was finally out in the world, because we had people beta testing, but it's a very different scenario when you actually launch. And we didn't do anything drastic in terms of like launch press or what have you. We posted it on social media. We posted on one of the tech product discovery sites, Product Hunt, and it was amazing to watch that reach happen, because it went from great feedback in the tech community to parents upon parents to SLPs to teachers sharing it on everywhere on social media, and the reception to it was absolutely wonderful. And that didn't mean that random people on the internet were going to use it, but we got a lot of like, how do we help? And
that's awesome.
And yeah, for us that was gratifying, because then it became, well, actually, we're not looking for anyone to join the team per se, but just spread the word. Tell someone who will tell someone who will tell someone. Share it, shout it from the rooftops. And from that, we really established a lot of connections that, are now starting to come to fruition and really blossom.
Yeah, and I think, it's a very energizing moment, right? Because it's that moment when something comes, it's kind of a very internal project, right? Where it only exists in the minds of a few people. And obviously it's sort of the work that we had done to build it. But you could at any moment say, meh, I'm not going to do anything more on this, and it would just evaporate, right? Like a dream.
Right.
So then you transition into that point where now it's real and people are using it and are trying it out and asking questions. And now I actually really like that feeling of, now I feel a sense of responsibility. Yeah. And that's actually very motivating. Yeah. And so I was on the phone on a Skype chat, where we're so early that we're chatting with every customer that wants to talk to us. So I was on a Skype
awesome.
with a family in South Africa who had just discovered the app and were playing with it. And we're using it in ways that we hadn't really expected, because again, we were originally focused on this as being a simple speech app for children to express their desires and requests initially, and then for SLPs to be able to use it to model and build up through the phases of PECs. But they actually discovered this usage of it where she, the adult daughter of the parents that I was talking with, was using it to practice her pronunciation of words.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So she was using it she would tap a word and then it would allow her to work on her articulation of it through repetition, which is great, right? That's like an exciting thing when you finding new value and uses for a product that you hadn't foreseen. So that's very energizing. I will say we're totally at the beginning, right? We're just starting. And we expect, people who are experts or customers who want to use it to be telling us, dude, why doesn't it do this thing yet? And why doesn't it have that? And I want this thing and I don't want that thing. And that's great, right? That's just the way that we evolve the product to be what people need. So more than anything else, we're kind of in a listening, high engagement, anyone who sends us an email, we're like, cool, let's chat, I want to hear from you. And that would be one thing I would say. I know I don't want to sound like an ad, but to anyone listening to this who wants to try it out, and if they have feedback and they're willing to give us 15 minutes on a Skype call, we will talk to anybody and we would benefit from your expertise. And we're optimized to be able to very quickly respond to that feedback and push it into the app. Again, that's a very modern app thing, right? We can push updates to the app very quickly.
You say that now until you get about 1,000 emails of people going, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Before we wrap up, and some of the things I loved about it, and I'm looking at it and how I could use it in therapy as a school-based SLP, I'm always looking for things that I can throw into my toolbox of different apps. And I love the fact that I could use it with one student to kind of work on wants and needs, and then I can use it in the next student if I have it on my personal iPad as just a different version of therapy cards. Like I love that versatility of it, where with some of my AAC apps, it's language only or the sentence only. What have we not talked about that you're like, oh, Matt, I wish you would have asked a question about this?
I have one thing which I hope that you would appreciate as an SLP, because we built this feature just for you, which is, have you ever had that experience where you're working with a parent and they have a kid and they or a student, and you want to set up their AAC tool, whatever it is, in these specific categories with these specific words. But the way a lot of these apps work is A, that's going to take you hours, and B, they're probably going to have to leave the device with you in order to do that. And we had that experience with Lyra, and it just seems insane to me that that's the way that works. And so our whole system is you would have the app on your device, and you just sign into that student's account.
Oh.
And then you can program it, and instantly, like within a second, it will auto update on their version of the app. And so when you don't need to keep their device, and then also hopefully we try to make it as easy as possible to add words, change categories. The categories are all like tags, and so a word can appear in more than one collection or category, and so it should be pretty easy. So that thing of that piece of I have to spend 2 hours programming this client's device, and during that time I have to have taken the device away from them. That is one thing that we're sort of really wanted to make sure that we fixed.
That is so cool. I love that. That's one of the problems I have all the time, is like a parent will be like, all right, I'll just leave you the device and then you'll get it back to my son tomorrow. And it's like, maybe I might be able to do it at lunch. Like,
yeah. Wow. And now that kid, and where for the kids who, and our Lyra is one of them, is that device is her voice. And so you're giving away her voice for like a day or two. Sucks, right? Anyway, yeah.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that. I did not realize that was a feature. Kat, is there anything that we didn't get to go to that you were like, oh, I wish you would have asked about that?
So March hit the cloud sync. That was one that we pressed heavily because of that simple fact. How do we make sure that time, SLP time is never wasted and the student's voice is never taken away? Was something we put heavy emphasis on. And so I'm glad you brought it up, because I briefly mentioned like that continuity earlier, but I didn't specifically as cloud sync. So I'm glad it got tossed in now.
What has been, before we wrap up, what has been one of the biggest hurdles with the Lyra app that you want to admit on a podcast?
That's part of it. I think for us, like really understanding the brokenness of how like payment in the education system works, especially here in the States, has been a really interesting one, because there's no consistency. Each district, each local, city, state, nationwide, everything is really different. So understanding the best way to make it ridiculously easy to get SLPs or educators signed up has been a bit of a pain, but a good way, because it enables us to really craft an experience that allows us to take less hassle away from people that are already dealing with this on a daily basis. So yeah, I think for me that that it also results in making it a bit difficult to easily get those people on board. So a hurdle that we're tackling now. March, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate that. I mean, the other thing is just that this is, because it's a passion project. You end up having to fit it into the margins of your life, as you know, Matt, with this podcast.
We're interviewing you. We're interviewing March at 8 a.m. on spring break.
And I appreciate that, Matt. Thank you. Yeah. So just, how do you, when you see a problem in the world, how do you go take the time to do it when no one is paying you to do it, when you don't really have the time to do it? And just committing to doing something like that is a challenge. It's very rewarding, but it's kind of like parenting, right? Like there's a lot of unpaid labor involved.
I just have to give you guys all five. And who's the five? I know March and Kat. Yeah. And then March, I don't know your wife's name.
Her name is Kristen.
So Kristen, and then Kat, your husband.
Ben.
Yeah. And then who was the fifth?
Asa.
ASA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's over in Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And actually, he just had a new baby. He literally, while we were launching, his wife had their second child.
How dare him have a baby during launch?
Yes.
But I give you guys credit because I have a 5 and a 2-year-old. And when there's a problem or a situation that arises that I deem a problem, I want to fix it. And sometimes I don't have the skills to fix it. And I just wait on somebody else to tell me how to fix it. And you guys saw, the problem with losing your voice or having to keep it there, that you were able to come up with a solution and you have the background to do it. That is just, that's one of the reasons I was excited when you emailed me to be on the show. Like, yeah, we'll talk about it, because it's not like you said, "Oh, I'm creating an AAC app to sell to everybody to make lots of money." It was, "Hey, my daughter had a situation and I want to help that." And I think that is such a cool thing that's one of the reasons I wanted you guys on air. And I just want to give you guys as much props as I can, your whole team of 5, that you're not able just to get it launched, but you're able to get it, or I guess, get it launched, not just created, but get it launched out there. That's such a cool idea. Like, I want you guys to truly know that those of us on speech science love that idea.
Well, thanks very much, Matt. We really appreciate it. And your podcast is really inspiring for us. And I love, for me, the combination of the expertise, but then the humanity, right? The reality is really great to listen to. It's inspiring as well, just to know and to hope to feel like a part of that community.
Well, we will send all whatever thousands of our listeners your way, so be careful.
Right.
So how do they... So getlyra.com. Go over the details one more time, everything that they need to know if they're going to go look for it on the app. Is it just Lyra app, or what is it when they do the iTunes or whatever that search?
Yeah, if you search for a Lyra app, it'll come up in the iTunes App Store. If there's a few things with the name Lyra, so if you want to be specific, you could type in Lyra Autism or Lyra Simple to Speech, and it'll pop right up, and you can download the app right there. And then there's videos and blog posts and stuff like that about how to use the app on getlyra.com. And if you have any questions, thoughts, feedback, you can just shoot an email to hello@getlyra.com. And we will get back to you immediately. And we'll even ask you if you want to chat on the phone so we can understand your specific needs.
Awesome. Well, before we end, do you guys want to promote anything else or any side projects or anything that way? Other side projects besides the Lyra app?
Can I promote one of Cat's? Is that okay?
Go for it. Yes.
This is more of unless you're a designer, this won't necessarily be a thing that you're passionate about. But one of Cat's other projects is about trying to make sure that designers design products that are accessible. And specifically, she built this super cool tool which allows designers who are doing visual work to test to make sure they're using things like color, the right colors, the right contrasts, so that whatever website or app they're building will be accessible to everybody regardless of their vision capabilities. So she won't promote this herself, and so I just wanted to shout out that Cat is a very inspiring individual in and of her own right.
Thank you.
Cat, that's awesome. Remember when I said, "Hey, how did you all come up with the design?" That's where you just subtly go, "Oh, by the way, I do this thing on the side." That's so cool.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
Well, thank you guys so much for sitting down with us.
No, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Matt.
Welcome back to episode 93 of Your Speech Science Podcast. I'm Matt Hott, joined down south, Michelle Wintering.
Hi again, Matt.
And the East Coaster, Michael McLeod.
What's up, buddy?
Guys, I have a story just for Michael. Michael, your state of Pennsylvania has so many kids in special ed that they need to re-look at funding to make sure that they can pay for the services they need. Doesn't that sound like a good way to look at the story?
Yeah, I was pretty much waiting for an article like this to come out. I know a lot of speech pathologists here, OTs, PTs, a lot of them, especially working in early intervention. I know for a fact a lot of them worked all summer long without getting paid.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. So it was a rough summer. We got a lot of emails from a lot of the EI organizations out here about Governor Tom Wolf and all the different funding and when it's going to be received and when it can be distributed out. So yeah, it's been a rough couple of months.
Back in 2013, there was a commission from Pennsylvania Special Education Funding Commission that developed a funding formula that gave student districts deemed to have the greatest need additional dollars. However, due to increase in student populations, they need to relook at that again. And I know this is a battle that's being fought in every state across the country. I believe there was a look here in Ohio to change the way schools are funded in general, to look at the Kentucky model. And Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way they do it in Kentucky, the way I believe that they told us up here, is that they collect all the tax dollars at the state level, and then they divvy it out per student to the individual district. Is that correct?
You are asking someone who has only lived here
Not
a
in the
year
schools. Yeah,
and
got
doesn't
it.
work in the schools or have a kid in the schools. So I'm not sure.
Where I know in Ohio, the way school districts are funded is that your individual school district, the housing and the businesses, they put the taxes back into that individual district, which can create very rich districts that are lucky to have very affluent family members living there and great businesses and great business partners. And then you have some very poor school districts that are unfortunately maybe the GM motor plant pulled out and a lot of people lost their jobs. And unfortunately, they lost their tax dollars along with them.
Yikes,
yeah. How many stories have we read where these low-income families in these low areas are just it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible what they're dealing with in terms of access to services. And I remember a long time ago, we did a story about, I think it was in England or Ireland, where they did like a raffle based on zip codes to see if you were able to access your services.
Oh.
So yeah, it's a service that is mostly free for families, early intervention, speech language pathology services. But the funding has to be there from the politicians and from the governmental bodies. So this is something that is crucial to our field, especially with everything going on that we hear about with PDPM, I believe it's pronounced right, correct? Yes, everything there at SNFs. Early intervention is crucial, and it's and all of the research shows the lifelong benefits of appropriate early intervention. So this is something that we need to constantly be in the forefront of and be very aware of what's going on the political level.
We need to just change. We need to fight, like you said, Mike, we need to fight for our kids. But I really do feel like we need to look at how tax dollars are spent on education. I'm trying to look up in Kentucky, it's called Special Education Excellence in Kentucky. And that is just for the special ed, the special education side. So I'm looking up for a couple more things, but it's realistically not fair to students if I live next door to the rich school district that their kids are going to get more because I'm one block over for my son. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. There are parents currently serving jail time for lying about their home address just so their kids can go to a school that has appropriate lunches and recess time and food and a better education overall. It's amazing how they're serving longer jail sentences than that Full House mom who basically gave millions of dollars so her daughter could go to school.
I know that happened in Ohio as well.
Yeah.
I remember stories of that with saying they lived at an aunt or an uncle's house and they didn't, or whatever it is, to try to get that 3 mile away, 10 mile away school district that has the resources. I mean, that's why things like Teach for America and other organizations exist, is because there are communities that are so underserved and don't even have textbooks. I mean, you're looking at that's a whole nother, we could have a podcast every week just on that.
I remember when I was looking at this field in the speech and language pathology, and there was a job offer on the northeast side of Ohio, and the introductory teacher salary was $27,000.
That's
And
common for teachers to start at that.
Right.
Yeah, and it's sad.
It was like, well, I can't afford to work there. Like, and imagine the kids as their teachers are coming in. I don't even know, man. Like, just perturbs me when it comes to funding of stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really bad. That's really, really bad.
I wasn't going to get as angry about this, but the more I'm letting it ooze into me, I'm starting to seethe a little bit about it.
Yep.
Is it as bad? Like in Ohio, I know that there are the haves and the have-nots. I've worked at a have-not and I've worked at a have in the school districts. Is it the same way in Pennsylvania?
Oh, absolutely.
And just in Philly,
everywhere,
Yeah.
all over the state. There's certain areas that have incredibly good public schools and certain areas that have unbelievably bad public schools, to the point where they can't retain teachers. The schools get shut down. There's asbestos all over the school.
Awesome.
Oh yeah. And the big thing here in Pennsylvania is the private schools. There are so many unbelievably expensive private schools that are pretty much more name than anything else.
And a lot of the public schools are charter schools now too, right? In Philly.
Yep. And they make it, and pretty much they make it very, very clear that, this is it's basically a privilege to go to these schools, and it's a very, very clear line between the haves and have-nots. No doubt about it.
We want to hear from you. What is your school district like? What is the funding situation at home? Head over to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com. Email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com, or give us a phone call, 614-681-1798. Or on the social medias, it's #SSPod. After the show, I think I'm going to have to ask my wife, because she went to a Pennsylvania public school, and what her opinions are of those. Last story, and I thought this would be a fun one because there's no controversy at all to this one. This is from the American Journal of Speech Language Pathology. Nancy Porter, Yves Niviergelt, and Mark Van Dam looked at tongue strength in children with and without speech sound disorders. Guys, this is the proof I need to do tongue-based strengthening exercises for articulation skills, right?
Well, did you look at the conclusions or no?
No, didn't look at the conclusions. Let me scroll down. This is going to be all the proof I ever need. Where is it? It's probably at the top. And it says,
weak tongue strength does not appear to contribute to speech errors in children with speech sound delays, but does appear to be related to speech sound disorders that are neurologic in origin.
So, my tongue base with resistance exercising does not seem to help on most articulation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's other studies that cover this as well, but here's the results for this one. For all groups, tongue strength increased rapidly from age 3 to 6.5 and continued to increase at a slower rate until 17 years of age. Children with speech delays, their tongue strength did not differ from their typically developing peers. Children and adolescents with MSD, what did they say as that? I'm sorry. Motor speech disorders. There we go. With motor speech disorders had decreased tongue strength compared to children with typical development or speech delays. So it sounds like they're differentiating between speech delay and disorder and a motor speech disorder.
Exactly.
Well,
yep.
I'm going to change my therapy back.
There you go. One article changes everything.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how many times, though, do you see new clinicians come out and they will do, I'm going to make your tongue move and I'm going to use this tongue depressor to try to improve the strength. I mean, I think there's a point where if you're trying to teach a kid, what is it, proprioception? Like
and the placement, the actual, yeah.
Like I've done that before with a patient that had cancer on the tongue, and with new movement of the tongue, we were just teaching how to feel where the new spots in your mouth were. I told her this wasn't going to help improve anything other than maybe she'll not bite her tongue as much when she's talking or eating. But there are some therapists that just don't know what to do, and they try to do these tongue strengthening exercises for every articulation kid because they think that's what you need to do.
This reminds me of a lot of the executive function students I work with, where a lot of their parents will try like those apps, those brain training apps like Lumosity and things like that.
Yeah.
And they'll ask for the research on that and the benefits of that. And I basically just tell them, all those apps are going to do is make you better at those apps. It's not going to improve your executive functioning, your intelligence, or problem solving or anything like that. You're just going to get a higher score the more you play.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I feel bad for new therapists that do this kind of stuff. And then, there's research to be done on I guess the motor side of this all, but there are things that you can do when you're looking at tongue movement, when you're looking at articulation. I work with middle school kids, and sometimes I just want them to feel what it feels like to have your tongue as far out of your mouth as possible. I want you to feel what it's like to have your tongue behind your teeth. I'm having them do something goofy for no other reason than I just want them to feel that tongue placement. Do you do a lot of artic, Mike, or do you try to avoid that?
I definitely try to avoid it because it's not my overall main thing, but it's pretty much impossible to do.
Try to avoid the articulation is impossible to do?
Yeah, they're always going to come around. They're always going to come knocking.
In the background is my articulation developing child, the 3-year-old, screaming, so I apologize to everyone at home. But, I mean, there are some things that I really like working with our kids, actually.
Really?
I do. Like, on the articulation side, I really do like working with the R kids because they're a little bit harder to do. And Michelle joins us again with her baby speech science hanging out on her lap. My son, Andrew, running around in the background screaming. This has now become the child podcast as we talk about articulation in the young ones.
What is your go-to thing for the R's?
So I've been rocking some 5-minute therapy. Are you familiar with this?
You can describe it for our audience.
So 5-minute therapy
Hi,
is
guys,
where
sorry. I'm back.
Hi, Michelle. So 5-minute therapy is where I work with the student for 5 minutes every day. And what we'll do is, if I'm getting an R kid, what I'll do is I'll have them sit down and we'll do what I call calisthenics for the R. And I'll have them say re, re, ro, ri, ra, and something else I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And then I'll have them do ear, air, R, ire, and then or. And then whichever one sounds the best, I'll just do in that 3.5, 4 minutes, try to get 40 to 50 samples in that time.
Okay. Do you ever do like the thing where they open their mouth as wide as they can and they start with an open vowel ah and then slowly bring their jaw up into an R?
No, I'm working with more older kids, so
okay.
Sometimes I found that if I'm just like, let's just get down to business and get this done, they're more willing to try therapy than sit with try something new. Does that work, or is that just a thing?
Yeah, you can try it. Like you basically start with like open your mouth as wide as you can, and you start with an ah, and you do the sustained phonation ah for as long as you can, and then you slowly bring your jaw up. Don't protrude your lips. Don't protrude.
Okay.
Just bring your and then you find that sweet spot. And some people need the jaw down, some people need it up. Everyone finds their own R sweet spot. So you open your mouth as wide as you can and do ah, and then bring your mouth and then close it slowly into an R. There you go. Just like that.
There it is. Okay.
Just like that. So everyone finds that everyone is in a different spot. So everyone and then you have them, just like you do a sustained phonation, you have them hold that for as long as you can.
There's somebody at home driving and going, why is Matt doing that in my ears? I hate that.
They're also trying to do it now. Don't worry.
I know, right? Everyone in your car do that. What Mike just said.
That's why we are the #1 podcast.
Top 30 in medical field. Just saying,
That's
guys.
Right.
I would love to keep talking with you, but I think we should send this thing home. We had a good discussion. I'm glad we covered the topics we covered today.
Yeah, that was nice. That was really cool.
Nice little discussion.
Loud movies, no money. You know, it's good.
It's the things you talk about with your friends. If you have an idea, we would love to hear it. Head over to our website.
Speech.
SpeechSciencePodcast.com. Let us know what you want. Michelle, you've got the baby in your lap. What are you doing next week?
Well, I share a birthday with a certain youngest person in the Hot household. So,
and when this airs, that was 3 days ago. And
Yep.
when this airs, that was 3 days ago, Michelle. Happy birthday.
There you go. Thanks. Yeah, we're going to see family for the birthday weekend because I also have a niece who shares that birthday.
Oh.
So we are celebrating.
Well, if you are driving through on Sunday, Andrew's birthday party is at our house, and you are more than welcome to drop in and get some food and take a break from driving from Columbus. Just saying. Mike.
That would be so fun. I won't be driving on Sunday. Sorry.
Mike, you are more than welcome to come too, but I know you're not coming through Ohio. What are you doing next week?
That's a good question. Pretty much just continuing the programs that I'm doing and hopefully visiting some more schools and meeting some more new people. So hopefully not sitting in one room for too long. Hopefully doing some more traveling around Philly.
Nice.
Yep.
When this airs, I will be helping my son's pack den do another Boy Scout meeting, and we're going to be getting ready for our spookery, which is the haunted Boy Scout camp out, and also doing some therapy. And I've got to change my schedule again. I've been numbering my schedule and sending them out, and it's almost at a joke at this point that I'm now going to be starting schedule number 6. As I have to rearrange my schedule almost weekly at this point to find the sweet spot. Well, you don't want to pull a kid from a class they're struggling in. You don't want to pull a kid from the class that they really enjoy. You got to find the class where they're just there but getting decent grades. Guys, working at a school's tough.
Yeah, it is. You're in the trenches.
We want to hear from you in the trenches, though. Head over to our website, SpeechSciencePodcast.com. Email us, speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. Give us a phone call or a text, 614-681-1798, hashtag SSPod. And also go to our website over at patreon.com/speechsciencepodcast. But if you don't do any of that, what we would love for you to do is rate, review, and share us, because that helps us get our message out to everybody. And we have a tendency to like what we're talking about, so we hope you do as well. Our intro music is Please Listen Carefully by Jazar. It's licensed under an attribution and share alike license. Our bump music is the County Fair Rock, copyrighted John Deku. Find him over at soundcloud.com/dirtdogmusic. And our closing music playing right now is The Slow Burn by Kevin MacLeod. It's licensed under a Creative Commons attribution license. In a couple of weeks, we'll see you at ASHA. For Michelle Wintering and Michael McLeod, I'm Matt Hott. Until we see you at the XPN booth, so long, everybody. And in Janice Wright's words, always be a willow.
Perfect timing.
You sounded so sad.
Oh, bye, baby speech science.
This has been an Exceptional Podcast Network production. Speech Science is edited and produced by MWH Production. Please follow Speech Science on Twitter at SpeechSciencePC and like our page on Facebook. For more original podcasts, please visit exceptionaled.com and rate and subscribe to our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Speech Science, episode 93. Proud members of the Exceptional Podcast Network. I'm Matt Hott. Excited because a long-lost friend has joined the show again, Michael McLeod. Mike?
Oh, silence.
I couldn't hear you. Broke up.
Oh, did I really?
Yeah, you did.
No. All right, we'll start over.
Try again.
In 3, 2, 1.